This is Branko Malic of Kali Tribune, and this video will focus on the concept of totalitarianism, a totalitarian mindset or mentality even, juxtaposed to what we call normalcy or normal mentality. And we'll use the great example of totalitarian mentality that we could even call totalitarianism for housewives, because we have an opportunity in this video to get an explanation of what it means to be totalitarian from a housewife. So, this is the interview with Ulrike Meinhof of Bader Meinhof, that is Rote Armee Fraktion terrorist group from Germany, just some time before she actually joined the group. It's in German, of course. I'll just read for you these captions. I'm sorry about this. For some reason, this title gets in the way. So Ulrike starts. The gap between her... Oh, sorry, this is not Ulrike talking, but a narrator.
Sie fühlte sich überfordert, quälte sich bis zur Verzweiflung. Ein Interview Ende 1969.
Some time.
Privatangelegenheiten.
Okay. Privacy is political, Ulrike Meinhof says. Children, education is political.
Sind eminent politisch. Kindererziehung ist unheimlich politisch.
Human relations are political because they show if the people are oppressed or free, if they can act thoughtful or not, if they can act in any way or not. Now we can stop here already. How come that raising children is political? Why? Well, this is the expression of totalitarian mentality in its purest form, and it's an expression that is given over a cigarette and cup of coffee by a woman who almost certainly had a nervous breakdown, because she is in very bad shape, as everybody can see, but she is theoretically up and running. she has no problem to put forward absolutely consequent theoretical statement, namely that everything indeed is politics, that politics is a principle of all. This means that her body is political, that her children are political, that her cigarettes are political, and that her cup of coffee is political. Everything is political. And this brings us to a clear and distinct definition of totalitarianism. Totalitarian system, as opposed to dictatorial or autocrat system, is such political system and such political theory that encompasses everything. That is, in effect, it politicizes everything, because this is a kind of total explanation of the world that by its very nature strives to be put in practice, and when tried to be put in practice, it has to encompass everything. The only way to do this is politics. That is to say, to make things that are considered personal, private, economical, this or that, to make them political. The reason for this comes from the fact that system, by its very nature, has to be all-encompassing. And our knowledge is, by its very nature, not all-encompassing. The polar opposite of this kind of thinking, if thinking this can be called at all, is being a normal. And if anything is hated by the people of this mentality, that is when someone tells them, but I'm normal, this is not normal. And can you guess what question you will be asked when you say this? If they can't get you before this firing squad, of course. The question will be, what is normal? And you will not be, I wager, able to answer it to their satisfaction. And this in itself is also normal. So let's see why. Well, what Ulrike Meinhof does here is that she approaches her life, that is her most personal and everyday life, through lens of absolute theory. The only way to approach life for totalitarian is theory. It can be Calvinist system of theological theocratic government. It can be, as in her case, a communist system. It can be a system of the right, but it is somewhat different. A rightist totalitarianism is different. We will not talk about it at length here. But I will just note that a rightist totalitarian system is built upon a premise not so much of a conceptual system, but of decisionism, of the deliberating will that does not have to give account why it deliberates. This kind of totalitarianism, on the other hand, has to have a priori justification for everything. And it is very hard to tell which one is worse, because they kind of merge at some point. Anyways, why is it that we cannot define normalcy so easily, and that we can even claim that normalcy cannot be defined? The reason is that normalcy is not something that we construct in the system. That is, it is not a concept in the sense of mental image that is consequently related to other mental images, creating thereby a enclosed perfect whole. Normalcy is something that is both outside and inside us, but it is something that has to be depicted and to some extent understood. But in our lives, in our everyday lives, if those lives are indeed normal, in the societies that are relatively normal, because they cannot be absolutely normal, rarely does anybody think about what makes it all so normal, because they don't have to, because the point of normalcy and point of the good, because by normalcy I understand the good, not normative, but normative in the sense of some kind of ideology, but in the sense of good, in the sense that I should not kill is good. What you have here is a metaphysical principle, and what you have as a human being is an intuition, intellectual intuition of this principle, but this intellectual intuition, to call it that, which is sometimes called common sense, but common sense also has various meanings, is the experience, comprehensive experience of life that is not transparent entirely, that is not systematic, that is not something you can give account of in a sermon or in the political system, as this poor woman is able to, because she has the system that is concocted before it is applied to life. Whereas where we find normalcy, where we find true beauty, being and such things, something that is greater than us and that we are aware of In the very similar way, you are aware of the light of the sun, but you don't look towards the sun. It blinds you when you look directly into it. And this is something that normalcy in everyday life and in great historical events in which it very rarely prevails, this is where normalcy is to be found. It is to be sought for. This woman knows that she knows. Normal man knows that he doesn't know. And strangely enough, the deeper his unknowing, the awareness of his unknowing, the greater his normalcy becomes, because this unknowing demonstrates something. It demonstrates maybe in a negative way what is not good. And the life of this woman and the predicament in which she brought herself is not good.
Die Beziehungen, die Menschen untereinander haben, sind unheimlich politisch, weil sie etwas darüber aussagen, ob Menschen unterdrückt sind oder frei sind, ob sie Gedanken fassen können.
She has to have politics, and by politics she means an absolute explanatory system, and at the same time the system of rules that will tell you what is obvious. She doesn't see the obvious here. She needs a committee to tell her that, because if politics is the ultimate, then you have to have political bodies that will decide what is good, what is not good.
Von den Bedürfnissen der Kinder her gesehen ist die Familie bzw.
For the social needs of the children, the family, especially the family, is essential and necessary. And this we have this instance of, absolute cognitive dissonance, because family is the main enemy of totalitarianism and is the main price for totalitarianism, because destroying, or even better, appropriating the family, politicizing the family in the inside is the ultimate in totalitarianism, because family is the unit, social unit, that is in fact not political, that is transpolitical, metapolitical, to use not exactly appropriate word, just to say in advance. Family is the unit in which you can escape from politics, you can escape from system, you can escape from oppression. It can be as oppressive as anything. It can be an oppressive family that in a way produces oppressive characters, but not in the sense people like Adorno and took practically that every classical family is oppressive, in this sense, that it absolutely, that it produces totalitarianism. So in a way you have to break up the family. I'm not quoting Adorno, but this is kind of line of thinking that people like him, in their irresponsibility, not, I would not say in their wickedness or evil, but irresponsibility and the idea of the overinflated idea of their own importance in the intellectual life of Europe concocted. No, family is a potential not only refuge, but is a potential source of normalcy, of freedom, of stability, and so on. Or instability, if instability is needed, because stability is ultimate good only in fascism. And now this woman recognizes the need of family.
Ja, ist die Familie, die ist der stabile Ort mit stabilen menschlichen Beziehungen, notwendig, unerlässlich. Schwer, unheimlich.
It's sehr schwer. It is very difficult. It's easier when you are a man.
Na, ist schwer. Ist unheimlich schwer. Ein Mann ist. Es geht in Ordnung und die Kinder brauchen ja wirklich Stabilität. Und wenn man eine Frau ist und also keine Frau hat, die das für einen übernimmt, muss man das alles selber machen. Und es ist unheimlich schwer. Also ist die Frau mein eigenes.
Main problem of all women in politics is the gap between acting in your political role and, on the other hand, dealing with everyday problems. Sometimes you feel helpless as a woman in that situation.
Wie alle anderen Frauen. Und sehr viele von diesen Frauen auch.
And this is not a problem of an individual. This is a main problem of women in the society. You see what she does. She is faced with her husband left her, and there is a whole background to this story. She's devastated and she's trying to be a mother to her children, but she doesn't see a problem in her politics. She doesn't see problem in herself. She sees problem in a system. That therefore system must be changed in order that she can be both mother and a terrorist. Because terrorist she was intellectually before she became terrorist actually, and she was not a very good actual terrorist, by the way. And her problem is the main problem of women in society. Namely, totalitarian mindset has a lot to do with ego. Ego as a principle in metaphysical, not psychological sense. In all-encompassing sense, because system is a product of ego. It is a reflection of it. Because ego is the point where you start from. This is I, pure I. This is what I am certain of. And this pure I is free, because this is from where everything begins in this kind of thinking. Now, to keep its freedom and at the same time make it real, as the world is real, it has to produce the system that will change the world in accordance to it. And this is not something that is on the margins. This is the problem of modern philosophy from the 19th century, even earlier, onwards. This main principle of ego. And then you have this. You become a projection of yourself. You become a ghost of yourself. And what everybody can see with the only ounce of normalcy in himself is that this woman is devastated. And this woman is complete dissonance between what she thinks, what she projects, and her life. She's in horrible situation, and she cannot get out of it because of contradictions of this worldview, of these systems of hers. But she cannot leave the system, and so What is this? This is oppression, her own inability to reconcile the irreconcilable is, of course, the main problem of the world in general. That is, this is the oppression of women. So there has to be a politics. This is why it's a political problem. Because there must be a kind of way to make a woman like her capable of being independent, radical, totalitarian politician and theorist as a terrorist, of course, because this kind of radicalism can only lead to violence, because the world won't change of itself. Of course, you have to critique it, you have to reform it, and this takes weapons, of course, and ends up in failure. But she projects this to be the oppression of women, and this is totalitarian mindset at its purest. So everything is politics, and you can say everything is me, but not me in the sense of Urliche. Me in the sense of abstract me, of I, of this subjective, absolute root of the system. Whereas normalcy and being normal, or whereas good, is metaphysical. It is not a system. It is not concocted. It is something to discover, not something to create. And therefore, in a debate with people like this, and this debate can mean life or death sometimes in some historical moments, where you have to beat them intellectually to prevent maybe coming to power of somebody like this, because somebody like this in power is a hell on earth, is a disaster. She'll turn everybody into image of herself, of course. You are in a very difficult position, because when she tells you, let us imagine that everything is politics, if you are a normal person, your first reaction will not be just to reject, it will be to appropriate the concept she's offering, because this means to have a dialogue. But once you appropriate this, once you let it into your own mentality, you cannot get out of her system, because this concept she offers you is a part of the closed system of concepts that has nothing to do with reality, but that is completely logically consistent. And it can be logically consistent with no great effort, because it is devoid of reality. This logical consistency is the only thing that makes it valid. The only thing needed to make it valid is consistency. And you can't beat this from the inside. You have to beat it from the outside. Now, somebody can be prone to this kind of thinking and not be exactly totalitarian. But then it means that he or she does not have a system, and that he or she could abandon this position. But then we are talking about something else, that we are talking about legitimate politics, the politics that are mutable and so on and so forth, because sphere of politics is what is mutable. It cannot provide political philosophy, political thinking cannot provide systems by definitions. It is very very prone to provide them in the modern times, but those systems are failures. Metaphysics is something completely different. It is never a system. There was this idea, especially in classical German idealism, of metaphysics as a systems, and from the dissolution of German idealism there came Marxism and left Hegelianism in general that gave birth to this. It comes from this idea that I is the principle of knowledge, and the system is the only form in which knowledge, the truth that is, can exist. The system, the truth is the whole, as the Ganze, as Hegel would say. And then you have this. Whereas normalcy begins with has a much more difficult and thorny beginnings. It is the intuition of truth, but not the explication of truth. To explicate the truth, you need time, because you are explicating temporarily what is not temporal. You are explicating finitely what is infinite. You are talking temporarily about something that is eternal. And this was always a problem. And but what I want to show here with this video is that this problem is not the problem of Platon or Proclus or Meister Eckhart or anybody like that. This is this is everyday problem. This is a housewife problem. And Ulrike Meinhof failed at solving it miserably. She went to the opposite side of renouncing the problem and creating a new one, and self-destructed in the process. Let us see.
Wobei man umgekehrt sagen kann, da wo politische Arbeit nicht
You see this can what she says here can make you think erroneously that she is just morally consistent. Has been put in contact with your private life. You can't prize anti-authoritarian lifestyle and on the other hand beat your children. This wouldn't work. Beating children is not good whether you are authoritarian and authoritarian. Spanking is, but beating not. Now, what she says here is not because she is anti-beating children, but because it would not be consequent with her system, not with her moral principles, but with her systemic principles, her political principles. Everything is politics. And this is totalitarianism in its purest form. It's a little retro. These are 70s, and this is this extreme Marxist left. Now we have far different people at hand, and they are not as ready as this woman was to put all this in action if somebody does not provide them with funding and if the institutions are not behind them and so on and so forth. You see this. You cannot give your kids a slap without getting into politics, even at home. You can't erase the balance of power you have at home without fighting the balance of power in the everyday's life. This is complete lunacy. This is a kind of lunacy that you cannot prove that it is not lunacy, because in the system in which this works, there is no contradiction. There is no ability to contradict. If I would tell her, well, Frau Meinhof, this doesn't work. This is you have to take a look in the mirror. She would probably tell me I'm crazy, because it's not about looking in the mirror. It's about debating the dialectics of everyday life and politics, but it is not. And this is very dangerous. When you have somebody like this in power, you are in a lot of trouble. And this is the way of thinking. This is this systemic way of thinking, and this is totalitarianism. And you can note that this totalitarianism for housewives, totalitarianism in everyday life, has some advantages over the normalcy in everyday's life, because normalcy, which also has deep roots, and normal mentality has metaphysical roots, much deeper roots than we are wont to think, is not systemic in this sense. It needs more time. It is more difficult to appropriate mentally. It is more difficult to live by, and it is never radical, because it cannot justify its own radicalism. It cannot say this is the absolute truth. I know it, and I know every implication of it, because it is impossible. For this woman and her theory, it is not only possible, it is necessary. So you are this kind of mentality in certain conditions can win over normalcy in a second. And it can even go so far as to say that normalcy is just a mask of fascism, which it can be, being normal, being like what we say, normal people doing their jobs and so on and so forth. Most totalitarian regimes rely on such people, but this is not because they are normal. This is because their normalcy was not built upon following the principles, but was built upon inertia of normal society that functioned well, and at one point was taken by the powers that put it to evil use, and they were not most people then are not able to, don't have courage, or are too lazy to kind of rebel against this. But this does not diminish in any kind the value of being normal, as a left is usually tries to do, in fact. And here you have where this totalitarian mentality brings you. Okay, this was Branko Malic of Kali Tribune. I hope this was informative and interesting. Signing out.